Morning. Morning. Morning, Liberty. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? Morning, Jason. Morning, Lizzie. Okay, hopefully everybody's had a time to start thinking about some issues they might be interested in reading about. I'm going to talk more about research questions. Essentially, once you have your research question, you have the thesis for your paper depending on how you answer the question. And I'll show you what I mean after we start talking about developing it. Okay. So let's look again at what a research question is. So basically, it helps focus your research, both so you're not trying to search through thousands of sources, and also so you don't have too much to cover in a short research paper. You can always expand. It's much harder to contract without losing a lot of work. So it has to be clear and specific, right? It's narrow enough that it can be answered thoroughly in the space of the writing task. And eventually we're going to shoot for 8 to 10 pages for the last paper. This next one is 4 pages. Concise. We can work on expressing it clearly in the fewest possible words. It's got to be worth talking about. That's what they're saying when they say complex. It's not a yes or no question. Remember we talked about thesis statements? They pose something arguable. Yeah. So it has potential answers open to debate rather than an accepted fact. So what you're going to do for our class for the academic lab only is you're going to submit 3 research questions that you think might be good for a research paper, a controversial paper. Let me show you the assignment. This is under the academic writing lab. We're going to work on this today in class. So develop 3 research questions that can be used for a controversial paper. You're going to follow the steps under this page that I'm on right now, which I have the link right here. Okay. There are sample research questions we're going to look at that you can refer to when you're creating your own. You're going to use the MLA format for the first page just to practice the format for the first page of an MLA paper, and then submit your questions in a Word or Google Doc. Questions so far? So you're going to follow these steps. Hopefully you've already looked at some interesting general topics that you'd like to read more about. You're going to focus on something that's more current. So slavery in the American South is too old for this assignment, but something that's going on right now that's controversial. Okay, you're going to do the preliminary research on your topic and narrow it down. Consider who your audience is. It's going to be academic in this case, so you're going to have to back up what you say with research. So you have to make sure there's enough research out there to do that. Okay, and then you start asking questions. What are you curious about the issue? What harm does immigration do? How helpful is immigration to our country? What does the research show? Is open immigration harmful? Could be a potential research question. Then you kind of run a checklist over your question. Is the question clear? Is it focused? Is it complex or worth talking about, really? Okay. And the part where you begin your research, we're going to hold off on that for right now until you choose the question that you're eventually going to ask. So these are the steps that I mentioned in the assignment, steps 1 through 5. Okay. So let's look at some of the sample research questions. How should social networking sites address the harm they cause? It's a little vague. In this case, they narrow it down. What actions should social networking sites like MySpace and Facebook take to protect users' personal information and privacy? Or we could change it to right now. For example, a story came out recently, and both Facebook and Twitter have censored the story. I mean, basically, they've decided that the story is not an authentic story. And so they put notice up for their readers that this story basically is unproven. And lots of people are upset by that. It's a political story, so of course they would be. So you could say, what action should social networking sites like Twitter and Facebook take when false information is posted? A lot now they're starting to flag tweets and flag Facebook posts that could spread disinformation about, for example, COVID. So if somebody says that it's as harmful as the flu, it's like many, many more times harmful than the flu. So they might flag that. I think they're leaving the post up. It kind of looks like they're testing it out. You guys follow me? But they'll sort of. I just posted something on Nextdoor about where to go vote, and on Facebook, and I got just they attached a link to it for voter information, which is fine. I don't care. But so basically, they're trying to make sure people can't spread disinformation. So it's interesting. Instead, you could evaluate how they're doing that. Does it work if you leave up a post that's false and just note that it's false, or should you take it down altogether? There were some death threats, or basically people saying unkind things when the president was diagnosed with COVID. Should they take those down? Should they block accounts? Should they do the same thing for famous people that they do for everybody else who uses Twitter? They're interesting questions. Okay. What is the effect on the environment for global warming? Well, that's a huge topic that would cover so much territory. So better, what's the most significant effect of glacial melting on the lives of penguins in the Antarctic? And I know that seems really specific. You may have to broaden it out depending on what research you find. But like I said, you can always get bigger, but if you start with this, you're going to cover a lot of territory and then realize you still have too much to go and then have to narrow it down and have to toss out a lot of the work that you've done. You can't, if there's a book about your topic is too large. You can't cover it in a small paper if somebody's covered it in an entire book. You might be able to take a chapter from that book to help you narrow it down. Or an article topic. How are doctors addressing diabetes in the United States? I mean, it's really not that difficult a question. I mean, they're treating their patients, obviously, and they're trying to give them the best treatment. So something more complex, what are the environmental, behavioral, and genetic factors that predict whether Americans will develop diabetes? How can these be used to aid the medical community in preventing the disease? So basically, it has to be something complex and interesting enough to talk about. It has to be focused, clear. So let's try it out. What is a topic that you have looked at researching? So I'm going to throw a topic out and we'll come up with some research questions. A big topic area. Like
Autism?
Autism, okay. So what are some areas under autism that we could look at? Treatment, maybe? What else?
Different spectrums. So like on the spectrum, you could have high functioning or low functioning.
Right, so types, right?
Yeah.
Good. We're just doing the brainstorming thing, right, guys? The pre-writing thing to kind of see what we know about the topic and how we can divide it up. What else? There are other things controversial about it. How about hiring artistic people to work? My friend's daughter is autistic and she works at a plant that is specifically for people with special needs. So they created it, but then some companies hire them, you know, just as a matter of course and work with their needs, right? What about schooling and education? There's some controversy about whether kids with handicaps should be mainstreamed, which means they have classes with everybody else. I don't know, what was it like at your school? Did you have students with developmental needs in your classes, or did they have separate classes?
I know that at Alton, there was, I don't want to say like the higher functioning kids. So the kids that could understand easier, they were with normal classes, normal, you know, that was their normal. But the lower functioning, the higher up on the spectrum, they had their own curriculum.
So that could be an interesting research question. Which autistic students can benefit from being in regular classes?
Mm-hmm.
And we have our first research question, right? Something that you can research. You can say these students benefit from the classes because they understand. Because there has been some studies that if they have different disabilities, then they need more help. They need, you know, different kinds of approaches than a standard classroom that's got a bunch of kids. How many people did you guys have in your classes? Are you talking 20, 25, 30, less, more?
25 to 30.
In high school? Like
Yeah.
like 15 to 20.
15, 20, yeah. But it depends. Like if you've got a classroom that's 15, it might be easier to integrate an autistic student versus if you have to put somebody in a class twice that size that's in a more overcrowded school. So that could be one of the factors you look at is class size. Max was 30, yeah. So yeah, it depends. So that, and then here's where the answer to the research question becomes your thesis. It's already nicely built in, which is high functioning autistic students can benefit from standard classes, from joining standard classes, benefit socially. And we focus on socially and see how far that gets us. So you basically answer the question to find your thesis. Okay. Okay, good. Somebody throw on another topic.
Online schooling.
Online schooling, yes.
Would that then tie into like how isolation affects the psychological, like mental on humans?
So we can look at the psychological effects. Effects, I can't type today. What else? What other kinds of effects? And that's actually a good focus. What was that, Lizzie?
If people learn more.
Yeah. How does it affect, you know, the ability to learn?
I was gonna say like you have like an straight A student and then they go to online and then they're not straight A no more.
Yeah, it's a different, approach. If it's asynchronous versus synchronous, you know, you have regular classes where somebody's. Go ahead, Jason.
Or it could be the other way around, where they do horribly like at school. I didn't mean to cut you off, by the way, but they do horribly at school, but at home they do even better. So
That's an interesting question. Which students benefit from online schooling or suffer? Okay. And conversely, you'll end up talking about the students that do not benefit. And you'd probably want to say which students benefit educationally or socially, you know, or psychologically. Pick one of those areas. See how far you get. If you don't have enough material, then you can always expand. But start small. Okay. What other questions about online schooling? I'll just say, like, is anybody studying to be a teacher? You know, how do you deal with technology failure?
How do up and coming teachers know what's gonna happen to them?
Yes.
I'm studying to be elementary education.
So, you know, unfortunately, this will probably not be the only pandemic we have.
I know.
I hate to say,
Looked at me the other day and was like, "What are you gonna do if you can't have a classroom?" I was like, "I don't know."
well, they're coping. God bless the teachers of America who are teaching elementary students online, because I don't know.
No kidding. I've seen so many videos and I'm like, what did I do? What did I get myself into?
Yeah. They're trying and they're adapting. But because there's also places where, like in Alaska, some people can't get to the school physically. You know, they'd have to take a plane ride there or something equally egregious in order to, or it's like 30 below some school days, you know, and you don't want to send your kids out there. And so when it does, you know, when it's necessary, how do you best teach elementary school students online? Or what are the best methods? And we focused on a certain group. And then regardless of, say you are in the classroom, these days we're still using a lot of technology, right? Even if I was face to face with you guys, I would have played the radio show for you. I just would have used the speakers that we have in the room and the computers there, which I used to do. And so, you know, there's still that element you could focus on incorporating it in an in-person class or teaching an online class. Yeah, the best thing to do is follow your own curiosity and the questions that you would like answered to come up with these. Okay, so if autism, online schooling, give me another one. What's everybody thinking about these days? Healthcare, okay. What kind of healthcare do we want to talk about? That's big. Now we're going to narrow it down. How we should provide healthcare? Do we want to talk about America? Reform healthcare? What are you guys interested in? How many of you are on your parents' insurance and about to lose your coverage? Yes, because if the Supreme Court in a week or here invalidates the Affordable Care Act, are you going to pick up other insurance?
I'm on my parents' insurance till I'm like 26.
Not if they invalidate the Affordable Care Act.
I was gonna say I'm on mine through my dad's, but like if they do this, then I'm off of it because I'm an adult, I guess. That's how my dad
That was
put it.
one of the provisions of the Affordable Care Act, was that you guys get to stay on, and my kids get to stay on their parents' insurance until they're 26.
Yeah, that's how mine was.
I will also be losing my health care because I work several jobs instead of one job that's a full-time 40 hours a week. I have multiple jobs. And since none of them have benefits, so what are we going to replace it with? That would be a good question. What should we replace the Affordable Care Act with? That would be a good question to research. What are some options? Has anybody looked at it at all? Tacos would be lovely. Now I know what I'm having for lunch. Thank you, Reagan.
Reagan, what are you talking about replacing it with tacos? What is wrong with you? She's
That's
trying to have a serious conversation and you're making it a mess.
making me hungry. I mean, have you guys heard of Medicare for All?
No.
That's one of the proposals, which would be Medicare right now is used for people who can't afford regular insurance or don't have a full-time job and are under a certain income threshold. So what they would do is basically, well, I think former Vice President Biden is advocating Medicare for all who want it. So basically, if you don't have insurance, you could sign up regardless of your income. So that's one of the proposals. Some other proposals, the individual mandate. I don't know as much about that one, so if somebody would like to do a paper, that would be interesting. You guys tell me new stuff all the time. I get educated on all of the current issues.
What about free college?
That is another thing. Free college has been proposed by various presidential candidates. I believe the plan is to forgive $50,000 worth of student debt immediately. think that's what Biden said.
That'll take away my debt. Oh, that's so nice.
So that's what one of the things. And then to make state colleges, like I think California's colleges, their state colleges are free. State and community colleges free.
Would
And
McKendree
private, so go ahead, Lizzie.
would McKendree do that?
Unlikely because they're a private school.
Gotcha.
So yeah, they're just trying to make it more affordable because the costs. There's another thing. Why have costs risen for college so rapidly? Ah, yes, Cole. So the proposal to pay for it. Hold on a second. Why have costs risen for college tuition so quickly? So that's one possible research question. The proposal is a tax on everyone who makes over $400,000 a year. Because with our current tax system, many companies can write off and have people that they hire basically to minimize their tax liability. So I don't know if you've seen some of the news stories that say Amazon didn't pay anything in taxes, blah, 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 or they get massive incentives like to settle in a specific city. So the city will say, hey, come and make your corporate headquarters here and we won't charge you any taxes for 10 years or something like that. So basically they've run some of the numbers. Now, whether you believe this will work or not is definitely open to discussion. But yes, everyone who makes over $400,000 a year would have a tax increase. And I don't know if you guys, Elizabeth Warren had like a 2-cent tax. So like hers was like, I think everybody who makes over, I like the top 1%. How is it fair to them? Well, that would be a good question. Good research question. Is it fair to tax wealthy people at a higher rate?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent research question, right? So you can make arguments on both sides. You could say, hey, they came up with an idea that earned them a lot of money. They should get to keep the money. Or you could say, but public funds pay for the roads that transport their workers and the education that educates their workers. And so they benefit, they have an outsized benefit based on, you know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't benefit me because I don't employ anybody, that the roads also carry other people.
But is it fair to tax lower income people the same as wealthier people?
Yes. So that's called a flat tax. So we can say which is better for society, a flat tax or a graduated tax?
I feel like there should be two different. Because if you're above a certain amount, like income-wise, you should get taxed higher. I don't care if you're more wealthy or not. Your tax returns, they'll show it.
Well,
But lower income people
yeah,
shouldn't have to be taxed as much as that. That's just wrong. Sorry.
So yes, in fact, does anybody live in Illinois that's going to vote? Are you familiar with the fair tax proposal that's on the ballot? That's the tax that would tax wealthier people at a higher rate. It would basically change the law to allow Illinois to tax wealthier people more than poorer people. And so I don't know if you've seen the ads. I didn't used to have to watch this many ads. I hate ads. But I'm seeing a lot of political ads. So basically, there's both sides are fighting about whether or not this is fair, like Cole was saying, right? So that would be an interesting one for this paper, is to look at the Illinois fair tax.
I feel like it's unfair.
Well, now, cautionary, please go into it with an open mind, because you may not want to ask about fairness, because that's less of an academic question, and you may want to ask about, like, is it better for society? Is it better for infrastructure? You know what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
Because fairness is so subjective. You want to be careful to focus on something that's provable with research. So you can prove that it would hurt businesses, right? Because I think that's one of the ads that I saw. Like, if we raise the taxes on them, then they have less money to pay their workers, and, you know, there are reasonable opinions on both sides of that issue, right? So, yeah, so there is a lot of controversy about how we tax people, because right now everybody's hurting because of the coronavirus, the extra costs, and the reduced income. You know, Illinois already had a budget problem before the coronavirus. And so this is kind of exacerbated, and then this is part of the answer that Illinois has come up with. And if we don't do that, somebody would like, what happens if we don't do that tax? Then we all will probably end up paying more in taxes. So. And some people will say that's fair, you know? But then some people will say more people have been affected negatively by the coronavirus. If you're wealthier, you tend to be able to do your job from home, you know, or take a financial hit, you know, until society gets back to normal. So yeah, you're looking into the issues and seeing what's most interesting. How about you? Have you guys heard of universal basic income?
Nope.
Okay, UBI was proposed by Andrew Yang, who is a vice presidential candidate. What it essentially says, and they've done pilot programs, in fact, California's starting one, where you basically give people, no matter what their income is, a certain amount of money. Okay. So they were proposing this for during the pandemic, you know, because so many people lost their jobs and couldn't go out. They were like, let's do a temporary universal basic income where we just give everybody, well, one proposal was $2,000 a month. We pay them $2,000 a month. And some countries have done this who are dealing with coronavirus. Of course, they were able to come out of lockdown and control the rate of the virus a little better in some cases. But basically it was like, because like we got a $1,200 payment, right? And you guys may not have, because you are college students. I don't know how many of you were able to access it, but that was back in, when did they do that? May? And now people are getting evicted, and they still haven't done anything further to help people, so it may get ugly here. Or you could just say that, you know, people will have to deal with it however that they can. The government isn't responsible. There are some interesting questions, but Andrew Yang proposed giving people $2,000 a month, no questions asked, as a way to lift people out of poverty. Because right now, I think there are let's say 4. There are 4 people in the United States who have more wealth than the bottom 50% of all the people in our country. So 4 people have more wealth than 50% of the people in the United States. Some people are like, they earned it, you know, because actually the billionaires have gotten richer. I don't know how that works. I don't know why. So you could look at income inequality. But one of the reasons I don't have health insurance is because it's cheaper to pay people to work 20 or 30 hours a week and not have to pay insurance, right? Than it is to create more full-time positions. It's more cost-effective for employers. And really, it's kind of bad that they've gotten saddled with having to pay for healthcare. It's really not ideal to attach healthcare to employment. Because, you know, people change jobs or they lose their jobs and then they lose their healthcare. It's like a double whammy. All right. So, yeah, there's lots of interesting issues that are going, you know, how are we going to pay for the coronavirus pandemic? How are we going to prepare for the next one? all the things about online education. Some people say that brick and mortar schools are obsolete. Why do we have you move there, pay all this money to live in a dorm when you could go to school online? People say, well, that's because of the networking. It's the, educational experience, the focus. You're around like-minded people who are striving for an education. So that'd be a good research question. Are brick and mortar schools, colleges, obsolete? So you guys kind of seeing the process that you go through. You take your general issue and you're like, what are the most interesting questions that people are arguing about? And that will lead you to your research question. Okay. Then you just need to check it and make sure it's clear, that it's focused, that it's interesting enough to talk about. Okay. Because a lot of these issues affect all of us, how much we're going to be taxed, whether college is free, because somebody's paying for, that in some way, whether it's people who make over 400,000 or all of us, right? What are basic human rights? Does everybody have a right to health care? And therefore, if you don't have health insurance, is that a violation of your rights? They are interesting.
When are like questions due?
On Monday.
Okay.
Yeah. So come up with your 3 questions. On Brightspace, I put a link under ENG111 to the 3 resources that I gave you guys yesterday in class. But probably opposing viewpoints will have the most focused information. But you might find some stuff like you can use Google. Just remember that if something tries to ask you to pay, leave immediately and go to the library and see if you can find it on Butler Library site, because you paid for your access through the college tuition that you pay, right? So chances are you probably have access to it through the library. You can search by author or title in the databases. But right now we're just getting an overview. This assignment, good question, is going to be just for ENG280. And it'll be turned in on this one. So it is the first assignment we've had in a while that is just for 280, except for the Khan Academy exercises.
When is it due?
Monday.
Cool.
Okay. So you'll have the last 10 minutes here to kind of look around. I'll open another meeting in case you have questions or you want some help refining your research question, narrowing it down, polishing it.
Where do we type it out?
You just open a Word document, you format it like you would for an MLA paper with your name, instructor, class, date. You're just going to have 1 page, and then you'll turn that in under the assignment.
So it's, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Is it like you type out your questions and then you explain them or like answer them?
You don't have to answer them. You just have to have the question.
So how do we turn it into like 1 page?
It's not going to be like text. You'll have like number 1 and the question. Number 1 would be, are brick and mortar colleges obsolete? Number 2 would be the next question. So it'll just be like a list. It won't be like a paragraph or text.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Very short.
So 3 questions, but like everything is formatted like MLA, right?
Yes, just for practice purposes. Yeah. So it's just going to be
cool.
the top section. And turn it in under 280.